When an avoidant secretly wants you back, they often stay emotionally close from a safe distance by quietly watching, sending small mixed signals, and seeking reassurance without risking true vulnerability, revealing that their fear and shame still outweigh their willingness to take responsibility, while real love is shown through consistent action, honest accountability, and genuine effort rather than silent longing or breadcrumbs. These small crumbs can genuinely send you spiraling because your heart, still tender, still actively healing, wants desperately to string them together into some kind of promise. You start reading between every single line they send. If they didn't care at all, they wouldn't be watching my stories. If they didn't want me back, they wouldn't be liking my photos. If they didn't miss me, they wouldn't be messaging me about random shared memories. And there's some genuine truth buried in that reasoning. These little signals really do mean something real. They mean you're still on their mind consistently. They mean they haven't simply switched their feelings off like flipping a light switch. They mean there's an internal conflict happening inside them that you simply cannot see from the outside. But meaning something and actual maturity are not the same thing at all. Longing and genuine readiness are not the same thing either. Instead of ever saying I'm sorry directly, they often try to slide back into your life through casual, low-stakes contact instead, pretending it's no big deal at all, while secretly hoping you'll open the door so they never have to admit how much they genuinely care. And this becomes one of the most confusing, emotionally exhausting stages you'll go through because your heart hears one thing while their behavior is clearly saying something else entirely. They're not coming to you with honesty. They're coming to you with pure convenience instead. So it might look like a random meme they send you at midnight. It might look like a "this reminded me of you" text. It might look like a quick question about something they easily could have just Googled themselves. It might look like them replying to your story with a laughing emoji, as if you never once cried over them, as if you never felt your entire chest crack open the day they disappeared from your life. And you stare at your screen thinking, what exactly is this? What am I even supposed to do with this? Because part of you still genuinely aches for them to come back into your life. But another part of you clearly remembers all the nights you begged for even a single conversation and got total silence in return instead. For them, this kind of casual contact is simply a way to soothe their own anxiety without ever having to confront their own underlying guilt. If they message you and you respond warmly, they get to feel relieved instantly. They get to think, okay, I didn't lose them completely. They don't hate me. I still have access to them. And that sense of continued access calms the part of them that secretly panics whenever they imagine you actually moving on for real. But they achieve that calm without ever having to say a single vulnerable word out loud. They don't have to say, I hurt you, I know I hurt you, and I'm genuinely sorry. They don't have to say, I miss you far more than I'm willing to admit. Instead, they tuck all those truths behind a casual hey and quietly hope you'll do the emotional heavy lifting for both of you all over again. They may start conversations as though the breakup never really happened at all, sending a simple, "What's up?" as if they hadn't ignored your last 10 messages entirely, dropping in with "How have you been?" as though months of complete silence didn't teach you exactly how it felt to be alone, confused, and quietly trying to rebuild your own self-respect from scratch. And when you answer, even with just a short, polite reply, they take that response as proof that the door is still cracked open somewhere, that the bridge they burned is somehow still standing sturdy enough for them to walk back across, if they ever manage to work up the actual courage required. They get to hold on to that comforting belief while still hiding safely behind a mask of complete nonchalance. They may pretend to friends that reaching out to you was genuinely no big deal at all. They'll say things like, "Yeah, I just checked in, we're cool." But they won't mention the way their heart raced while typing your name into that message. The way they checked and rechecked their words carefully before actually hitting send. The way they kept glancing back at their phone afterward, anxiously waiting to see your reply come through, because admitting any of that would mean admitting that they genuinely care, that they're actually invested emotionally, that they didn't just leave and completely forget about you. And avoiding that particular admission is exactly what their defenses are carefully built to accomplish. The more you've healed over time, the more their casual contact reveals itself for exactly what it really is, an attempt to gain emotional closeness with absolutely none of the accountability required. They want the comforting softness of your presence, the easy familiarity of your conversation, the comfort of feeling understood by you, all without ever having to look you in the eye, metaphorically speaking, and say, "I was wrong, I was scared, and I handled you badly." And this is exactly where you often find yourself pulled back into an old familiar dynamic without even meaning to. They send a small message. You feel that old familiar warmth rise up inside you, and before you even realize what's happening, you're over-explaining yourself, oversharing personal details, overgiving of your energy, trying desperately to decode exactly what they mean, trying to read deep significance into every single emoji and every full stop they use. While they keep everything deliberately surface level, light, playful, and distant enough that if you ever call them out directly or ask, "What exactly are we doing here? Why are you suddenly back?" they can quickly retreat and say, "Whoa, I was just saying, hi, relax, it's not that deep." Inside them, though, it actually is very deep, but they simply don't know how to stay present when things go there emotionally. So they keep skating along the surface instead. And every time you engage with these casual touch points as though they mean absolutely everything, you end up risking your own heart against someone who's still actively acting like nothing really matters at all. You feel a little crazy because internally you're experiencing an entire breakup, an entire reconciliation, a whole relationship's worth of emotion happening in your body over something as simple as a "how are you" text. And they're acting like this is just two old friends casually catching up, when in reality it's an avoidant person trying to quietly check whether the door they slammed shut in your face is still somehow unlocked from your side. Sometimes this casual contact comes wrapped inside practicality instead. They ask about some small detail from your shared past, a show you used to watch together, a place you once visited, something you helped them figure out once before. They might say, "What was that restaurant we went to together?" or "Do you still have that link you sent me?" And on the surface, it's simply a basic question, but underneath it, there's a genuine craving for connection, for that familiar back and forth rhythm that used to make them feel truly seen and known by you. They miss that particular feeling without wanting to admit that they actually miss you specifically. It's simply easier for them to frame the contact as practical or useful rather than emotional. It protects their pride. It shields them from the risk of you saying no to something deeper and more meaningful. Because if you don't respond at all, they can tell themselves they reached out for a practical reason and you simply didn't answer, instead of having to admit they reached out because they genuinely still care about you. Other times they'll try using humor instead. They'll drop an inside joke that only the two of you would fully understand, something that belongs uniquely to both of you, a memory that aches quietly in your chest but makes them feel briefly close to you again for just a second. They'll pretend they're simply being funny. But what they're really doing is gently pulling on the invisible thread of intimacy that still somehow connects the two of you, checking whether that bond is still genuinely alive. And when you respond with a laughing emoji or a playful reply of your own, they feel that immediate hit of emotional oxygen. There it is. They still get me. We still have that particular thing between us. And for one brief moment, their loneliness feels a little less sharp. Their regret feels noticeably quieter. What they're not actually doing throughout any of this is the one thing that could genuinely build something real and lasting with you. They're not facing the honest truth of how they left things. They're not acknowledging the true depth of your hurt. They're not showing you, through consistent, clear action, that they're actually safe to trust again. They're circling around intimacy without ever fully entering it, staying carefully behind the wall of no big deal, because that wall keeps their ego protected, even as it simultaneously keeps the two of you from any kind of honest reconstruction. And this is exactly where your own personal growth becomes absolutely crucial. Because the old version of you might have felt grateful for even these small crumbs. The old you might have taken a late-night meme as solid proof that you were still on their mind, and then built an entire fantasy on top of that single moment, waiting, hoping, twisting yourself back up all over again. But the version of you who has actually walked through heartbreak, who has sat with your own pain honestly, who has genuinely started learning your own worth, has to be willing to ask a completely different question instead. Not do they secretly want me back, but is this genuinely all they're willing to give me right now? And if it is that actually enough for me anymore at this point in my life? Because you deserve so much more than someone quietly slipping back into your life through side doors and shadows. You deserve someone capable of knocking directly, waiting patiently, and when you finally answer, looking you straight in the eyes and saying, "I know exactly what I did, I know exactly what I lost, and I'm here fully now, if you choose to let me back in." Until their actions genuinely match that level of clarity, their casual contact will always say far more about their own fear than about your actual value as a person. when they see you pulling away, actively healing, and genuinely getting stronger. It scares them and pulls them in simultaneously at the exact same time. So they may show visible jealousy, subtle panic, or sudden renewed interest, all while insisting loudly that absolutely nothing has changed on their end. And you need to understand this particular contradiction clearly, so you stop gaslighting yourself whenever their behavior suddenly flips unexpectedly, and then immediately pull back the very second your answer starts touching on real, genuine emotion. They may offer small crumbs of vulnerability, like I've been thinking a lot lately, without ever actually following through with full, complete honesty, hoping instead that you'll fill in all the remaining blanks yourself, hoping you'll be the one to say, I miss you too, I want you back too, so they never have to risk fully exposing just how much your growing distance is genuinely stirring them up internally. And you're left standing right in the middle of their confusing mixed signals, your heart quietly waking up old hope while your rational mind is simultaneously saying, we've absolutely been here before with this exact pattern. This is precisely where your personal power and your lingering pain collide together, because you can clearly see, maybe for the very first time, that your absence was never actually meaningless, that your healing process didn't go unnoticed by them at all, that they're genuinely not as untouched by all of this as they once appeared to be. And there's a small, petty, wounded part of you that wants to lean fully into that realization, thinking, good, now you finally know exactly how it feels. But running deeper than that particular impulse is the part of you that still genuinely longs for them to meet you exactly where you are now, not where you used to be back then. And that's precisely why you have to be ruthlessly kind and honest with yourself throughout this entire chapter of your life. You have to remember clearly that their jealousy, their subtle panic, their sudden renewed interest are not yet actual proof of genuine readiness on their part. They're simply proof of real impact instead, proof that you genuinely mattered to them, proof that your ongoing healing is actively altering the entire dynamic between you two. But impact alone is simply not the same thing as real commitment. Discomfort alone is not the same thing as actual growth. And if you end up trading your newfound strength for the temporary comfort of their renewed attention, you'll likely find yourself right back inside that same old cycle, shrinking yourself down so they don't feel threatened by your progress, dimming your own light so they don't feel left behind by how far you've come. When they're genuinely scared and pulled toward you at the exact same time, when they show up acting like absolutely nothing has changed, while their actual behavior clearly demonstrates otherwise, your job isn't to drag them into deeper self-awareness about any of this. Your job is simply to stay firmly anchored in your own awareness instead. To know clearly that you can genuinely care about the fact that they're shaken by all of this, and still firmly refuse to abandon the safety and stability you've carefully built inside yourself over time. To know that you can fully notice their subtle panic and still calmly say, if you want an actual place in my life now, it's going to require far more than this small gesture. It's going to require real honesty, genuine consistency, and actual sustained effort on your part. And if they're simply not ready for that level of commitment yet, you absolutely do not have to slow down your own healing process just to match their much slower pace. Because the single most powerful thing you can do in the face of their obviously conflicted energy is to simply keep walking steadily forward toward the version of yourself who no longer needs someone else's fear to validate exactly how far you've genuinely come in your own journey. Deep down, the most honest thing avoidants actually do when they secretly want you back is think about you constantly and quietly, replay everything they did wrong in their mind. But the real, meaningful turning point in all of this was never really about their private thoughts at all. It's about when you personally decide whether their actual actions genuinely match the level of love you truly deserve to receive. Because inside their own head, there's an entire relationship still quietly running, long after they physically walked away from the real one you shared together. They hear your voice echoing in quiet moments throughout their day. They see your face flash through their mind whenever they pass by places you used to visit together. They remember your old messages, your laughter, your tears, and they do something they genuinely never did out loud, back when you were desperately begging them for basic clarity. They rewind constantly through the exact scenes where they shut down emotionally, where they left you on read for hours, where they deliberately changed the subject instead of actually answering your honest questions, where they told you that you were simply too much, when really you were just asking not to feel completely alone anymore. They lie awake at night sometimes and genuinely think, maybe I was harsher than I actually needed to be. Maybe I really did walk away too quickly. Maybe I really did make them feel crazy for wanting something that literally anyone would reasonably want from a partner. And those particular thoughts represent their real truth. The honest truth that eventually breaks straight through all the protective stories they originally told themselves at the very beginning. That you were somehow the problem, that the relationship simply wasn't working out, that everything was just too intense overall. They remember clearly the way your face genuinely fell whenever they cancelled plans on you, the way your voice actually cracked when you admitted you felt like you were the only one truly trying in the relationship, the way your hands actually shook while you attempted to explain how their emotional distance made you doubt your own fundamental worth as a person. And for the very first time, sometimes weeks or even months later, they genuinely feel the sting of finally realizing that you weren't simply being overly dramatic back then. You were actually hurting deeply, and they were directly the reason why. They think about you far more often than you could ever possibly imagine. Not just as some vague, lingering ache, but as an actual person they genuinely couldn't handle staying with, a person they simply didn't know how to remain present for. And their mind keeps circling back to the exact same questions you once directly asked them yourself. Why do I always run away the moment things start going well? Why do I completely shut down whenever someone gets genuinely close to me? Why do I always end up pushing away the very people who actually care about me the most? But the real difference between you and them is that you were genuinely willing to say those difficult questions out loud and actually sit with the resulting discomfort. They're only just now beginning to quietly whisper those same questions to themselves internally. And even then, they often rush immediately to cover those thoughts up with convenient distractions instead. They pick up their phone, they scroll endlessly, they talk to someone entirely new, they work longer hours than necessary, they do absolutely anything they can to quiet down the persistent ache that thinking about you consistently brings up for them. They imagine alternate realities sometimes, where they actually answered you honestly instead of completely shutting down emotionally, where they stayed fully present in the difficult conversation instead of storming angrily out of the room, where they chose to be genuinely vulnerable just once, instead of automatically defaulting to their usual pattern of escape. And those particular imaginings genuinely hurt them internally, not because they suddenly transformed into some cruel villain within their own personal story, but because they're finally starting to see clearly how much fear has actually been driving their behavior all along. How many times they let that underlying fear speak for them and act on their behalf instead. How much it genuinely costs them in the end to let that fear ultimately win out against you. They see you clearly in their mind now, in all of your complex, layered humanity. Not just the difficult moments when you cried in front of them, but also the way you consistently made them laugh harder than anyone else ever could. The way you intuitively understood their shifting moods without them needing to say very much at all. The way you genuinely noticed their small personal habits and loved them specifically for those little quirks. The way you consistently believed in their untapped potential, even during the times they felt completely stuck in their own destructive patterns. And the more honestly they remember you as a whole person, the harder it genuinely becomes for them to accept the comfortable lie that losing you was simply no big deal, or that it was somehow meant to be that way all along. Because the honest truth is that they lost someone who stood directly in front of them with a fully open heart, someone who asked for genuine effort specifically because they were consistently giving effort themselves, someone who saw straight through their defensive jokes and their practiced emotional distance and still chose to remain there regardless. And their mind will genuinely revisit that particular truth again and again, especially whenever life quiets down and their usual external distractions finally run out completely. But here's the part that will genuinely save you throughout all of this. Their private regret, their late-night thoughts, their persistent what-ifs, and their unspoken apologies simply are not a strong enough foundation to build your actual future on. Their inner world can absolutely be full of genuine sadness, genuine longing, genuine awareness that they mess things up badly. And you can still fully decide that it's simply not enough for you because you don't actually live inside their head. You live instead in the concrete reality of how they actually show up in your life. And that reality is precisely where your heart was originally broken in the first place. It's genuinely tempting, especially when you still love them deeply, to make their hidden internal feelings more important than their actual visible choices and behaviors. You catch wind that they ask someone about you. You notice they still quietly watch your stories every day. Someone mentions that they told a mutual friend they genuinely regret losing you. Or you simply feel it in your bones that you're not quite as easily forgotten as you once believed you were. And immediately your heart wants to say, "See, I knew it. It wasn't all just in my head. They actually do care. They really did love me after all." And there's genuine relief found in that realization, a real sense of healing in finally knowing you weren't simply imagining everything this whole time. But if you're not genuinely careful here, you'll end up using that particular knowledge to walk yourself straight back into the exact same fire that burned you so badly before, because you'll start convincing yourself that their private thoughts alone should somehow be enough to earn another genuine chance with your heart. The real turning point in your personal story isn't actually the night they finally sit alone in their room and cry over losing you. It's the day you personally decide that the only version of them you're willing to respond to now is the one whose actual behavior genuinely matches the love you deserve to receive, not simply the love you originally wanted them to feel for you. That means if they eventually reach out to you again, you don't just passively listen to their words alone. You watch closely for the actual pattern behind those words instead. You lean far less on statements like "I miss you" and lean much more heavily on concrete statements like "Here's exactly what I'm genuinely willing to do differently this time. Here's specifically how I'm taking real responsibility. Here's precisely what I've actually learned from all of this." And if those essential pieces are clearly missing from their approach, you no longer fill in the remaining blanks for them using your own hope. You no longer romanticize their private longing into some elaborate plan that doesn't actually exist in reality. You no longer settle for accepting a few emotional crumbs from someone whose entire heart you already know is genuinely capable of so much more than that. Their mind can absolutely function as a museum dedicated to the love you once gave them, full of cherished memories and quiet regrets and unspoken gratitude toward you. But your life was never meant to be spent waiting patiently at the door of that particular museum, hoping they'll eventually invite you back in someday and show you around. Your life is genuinely meant to be lived fully in the present tense instead, alongside people who don't just think about you quietly at night when they can't fall asleep, but who actively choose you consistently in the full light of day, clearly and courageously. Thoughts are genuinely easy to have. They cost them absolutely nothing in return. Actions, on the other hand, are expensive to produce. They require them to actually confront their own fear, their shame, and their long-standing patterns directly. They require them to genuinely change as people. And until you actually witness that real cost being paid through consistent visible behavior, their secret internal wanting belongs entirely to them, not to you. It's their personal work to do, their own mirror to face honestly, their own lesson to finally learn for themselves. Your work instead is to fully honor the fact that you were always genuinely enough to be thought about and missed by someone. And now you're also fully enough to refuse going back to a story where their unspoken internal feelings matter more than your very real, legitimate need to be loved in a way that doesn't ultimately break you apart all over again.